Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. I have been thinking back over the last couple of trials, and I have some thoughts on love and marriage. So let's go down to the beach and talk about this. And this is a video on love and marriage, and it's based on my personal experience, my observations, and much of the stuff that I've seen in the law. My aim here is to help people who are in a relationship and they have doubts. And if you have doubts, you have to resolve those doubts before you get married. Because once you get married, the only way to get unmarried is to go through a divorce. And that can be expensive. And if you have children, there are questions of custody and child support, and it can be an absolute mess. So the purpose of this video is to help people understand how things go wrong, what to look for, and how to make things right. So let's get into that. So about a week before I made the first major mistake in my life, my Aunt Naoma, God rest her soul, took me aside and said, "Tony, love is blind, but marriage is a heck of an eye-opener." You know, I should have listened because I made a pretty terrible mistake, and it wound up messing up my life for probably 5, 6 years. And as a result of that, I learned a big lesson. And I want to try and share some of those lessons because some of those lessons I see in the cases that we have done most recently. I know there is a lot of interest in the Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell case. I can't, I'm really having trouble thinking about doing anything more on that case or anything on the Letitia Stock case because it deals with the subject that I find just almost unbearable, which is the murder of young family members. It amazes me that in Lori Vallow's case, she was able to do that to her children. Um, Moms always have a strong protective feeling about their children, and that you could overcome that somehow is just amazing to me. And then again, you look at Letitia Stock and her behaviors, to a certain extent, Casey Anthony and her behaviors, although she was acquitted. I don't think she could I don't think she could go in for Mother of the Year, I'll put it that way. I always ask myself, and I see it from time to time. I was out with my wife several months ago, and we were out at the mall, and we were looking through my wife was looking through some clothes. I really I don't pay much attention to clothes. My wife was looking through some clothes, and this man started yelling at his wife. And the reaction that I saw from the woman, which was to shrink away and pull back from him, led me to conclude that she was probably abused. And when you will make a complete jerk out of yourself in public in order to intimidate and oppress your spouse, I think that says a lot about what kind of relationship you have. So I wonder, why is it that people always seem to go for people that are not their best fit? I think there are a couple of types. First of all, there seems to be the woman who goes for the bad boy. She's the person who wants to ride on the back of the Harley. She's the person who wants to hang around in the smoky bar and soak up all of that testosterone that flows around people who like to get into fights and do violent things. I don't know what the attraction is there. I mean, I can't figure that out. But apparently there are women who do that, and it just amazes me because it's very clear that anybody who would get into a fight and beat up somebody that they don't know in a bar would probably do the same thing to you. it seems amazing to me that people do not apply logic. And then you have what I would call the bad girls, because men are just as guilty of this sin as women are. Men tend to focus on external qualities. She's got a nice face. She's got a really pretty body. Um, those are things that matter absolutely not in the grand scheme of things. And so sometimes there are men out there who just refuse to settle for second best. And as a result, they wind up getting hooked up with really pretty people who are really ugly people on the inside. As my Aunt Naomi used to say, beauty is only skin deep, but ugly goes clean to the bone. And I think that's true. You have no further distance to look than Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Holy cow. You know, you have two people who are very successful actors, and they were in a constant battle with one another to see who, see who was the bigger jerk. Um, in the end of the day, I think Johnny Depp came out looking much better than Amber Heard did. That's just my opinion. You may disagree. Then we have the manipulators. And here I am specifically thinking about Alex Murdaugh. This is a guy who was so skilled at lying that he managed to deceive people for a decade. He managed to get himself involved in an opioid addiction, although the extent of that I am not actually sure is accurate. I think maybe that was something that was newly minted for trial, or for the upcoming trial that was sure to come. He was a master manipulator. He manipulated all the people around him. You'll notice how he manipulated one of his friends to get him to advance a legal fee directly to him instead of to a law firm. And that should have been a giant red flag. Every lawyer knows that fees are earned by the firm. They are not earned by individual lawyers in the firm. I mean, the individual lawyer may be the person who creates the fee, but the fee goes to the firm. And that you could get a friend to take that kind of risk for you shows tremendous skill at manipulation. And I think you see a lot of that in the dating world too. One of the things that I am constantly amazed by is how easily some people are led, and they will do anything to please people. Manipulators know that. They know that you want to please them. So they will set up a situation that allows you to make them happy. And they they know what other people need, and they give them what they need emotionally so that they can get things for their own sometimes nefarious purposes. And as a result, I think you have to look out for a number of behaviors. First, you need to look out for charisma. There are some people who just ooze charisma. Now, the world is also filled with the disasters that these people have wrought. You have David Koresh from the Waco incident. You have Jones, I forget what his first name is, but Reverend Jim Jones, that's who it was, who did the cult down in South America. You have Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was a very charismatic man. He was able to schmooze women right out of their socks, and in many cases, right out of their lives. And then you have Chad Daybell, who appears to be very charismatic and seems to have swept Lori Vallow off of her feet. I think you have to be really careful about who, when you are dealing with people who are manipulators and who have charisma. Sometimes it's a good idea to take a step back and wonder, is this going to work out well for me? And then you have the people who are controlling. These are terrible people for most of us. Some people need direction in their lives. Some people need somebody to tell them when to come out of the rain, but most of us don't. Anytime you have somebody who wants to know where you're going, what you're going to do, and is interested in every single thing that you are doing and wants to know where you are every step of the day, you have to wonder why they need to know that. In many cases, it's because they are doing things that they don't want to get caught doing. And that's why they need to know what you're doing. The fact of the matter is, either you trust someone or you don't. And that is how you deal with a controlling behavior. If someone is on your case all the time, you just put the question out there. Do you trust me or not? Overall, I would say that the real secret in terms of getting into a marriage that will last is listening to your gut. You know, we all have instincts for a reason. And a lot of times, because someone is pretty or someone has things that we want to have also, sometimes we ignore our gut in favor of what we want. And that's not a good thing. You know, there are a number of different things that attract people in a relationship. Sometimes it's physical, sex. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's the things that money can buy. Um, you know, I don't know how someone like Donald Trump could ever be sure that someone really loved him, because there are so many people that just really love money and will do anything to get it. And again, when you have that kind of wealth, I think you attract those kinds of people to you. Now, that doesn't mean that I think anything bad about Melania Trump. I'm just saying that that is one of those things that I think you would always have to worry about. So, what is the recipe for success in a marriage? The first and I think most important thing is you have to have intellectual compatibility. In other words, you have to be able to talk to one another on the same level. You have to have someone who is reasonably close to your IQ in order for you to relate well. The reason intellectual compatibility is good is because it gives you the ability to talk about anything. Then you have to have moral compatibility. That doesn't necessarily mean that people have to have the same faith or the same religion or agree about every single thing. There are very, very few people who agree about every single thing. But if you share the same core moral beliefs, if you share, let's pick abortion as one issue. If you share the belief that abortion is wrong, then you're probably going to, that's a good thing. You have that core belief, it's a good thing. If you both believe that abortion is a woman's right to choose and it ought to be hers, again, if you agree on that subject, you are unlikely to get into disagreements about those kinds of things. If your moral compasses are aligned, that is an exceptionally good indicator that you are in a good fit in a relationship. I want to point out something that divorce taught me, and that is that many times in a relationship, particularly one that's gone on for several years, you begin to associate happiness with the absence of pain. In other words, it's like hitting yourself in the head with a hammer. It feels so good when you stop. Happiness is not the avoidance of acute pain. If being with the person that you are married to brings you pain, either emotional pain or physical pain, any kind of pain, if it is causing you to feel bad about yourself, then you're not going to be happy, not truly happy. Because joy is not the avoidance of acute pain. What joy is a feeling of utter contentment and wonder. You know, I have been married to the same woman for 23 years now, and there is not a day that goes by that I don't wake up and think, how did I get this lucky? I am always amazed at how much more deeply in love I am with my wife today than even on the day that we wed. And I can tell you this, on the day that we married, I had absolutely no doubt that this was the right person for me. I think if you go into a relationship thinking, well, maybe this will work out, that's not the way to go into a relationship. I want to point out that one of the criticisms people are going to have and may voice is that, well, people change. The person that I'm married to now is not the person that I married. While that is chronologically true, it's not true in other respects, because the behaviors that you find problematic today were there at the beginning, but you didn't pay attention to them because you were getting something that you wanted. People change, but not really. People are almost always the same person that they were when you married them. It's just that their behaviors have enlarged or gotten bigger. And as a result, you're finding it difficult to deal with those behaviors. I want to point out that every marriage hits rough spots. There is not a marriage that has ever been where people did not disagree about things, have an ugly spat where they yelled and said things they didn't mean. You have to know the difference between the occasional fight and the end of a relationship. Or in another way of thinking about it is the fact that your relationship is dead, but the marriage is still alive. Because a relationship involves an interchange of information and an interchange of intimacy. And if you are not having an interchange of intimacy and information together, then you are ultimately not going to be very happy. I also hear people say, well, as in the case of Viola Bowman, her husband believed that you stayed married no matter what, and you did that for your children. But children grow up and move on. And they're not going to be there for the rest of your life. They're not going to live in your house for the rest of your life. It is important to remember that to thine own self, you have to be true. Staying married for the children just makes the two married persons and the children all together miserable. Trust me, I know from experience. Sometimes you just have to cut your losses. Sometimes you have to realize that the relationship is no longer viable, and you have to sit down and have an intellectual conversation with your spouse and say, this isn't working. Either we are going to have to fix it or we're going to have to end it. And a lot of times when you have that conversation, it leads to a renewal in the marriage. And that's a good thing. A lot of times it leads to, sometimes it leads to having to duck when the plates get thrown. But the bottom line is, it's better to know than not know. It's no longer, you don't need to leave the elephant in the room any longer. Get that elephant out and get him free. My final thought on a bad marriage and a bad relationship is that many times they degrade into abuse. Now, Johnny Depp is not the only person out there who has ever been in a relationship where his wife battered him. The evidence that was presented at trial certainly indicated that Amber Heard was violent toward him. But Depp had a huge problem with alcohol and substance abuse, and it's difficult to put a lot of blame in either place there. But what I can tell you is that if you are drowning your sorrows in alcohol, it's time to get out of your marriage. If you're abusing drugs so that you can cope with your marriage, it's time to get out of your marriage. And if you get hit, it's time to get out of your marriage. If someone hauls off and smacks you across the face or hits you in some other way, or most particularly if they ball up a fist and hit you, it's time to cut your losses and move on. There is a reason why divorce is so expensive, because it is so worth it. Now, I don't want anybody to think that I'm advocating for divorce here, because I'm not. If you're married and you have the ability to keep your marriage together and you're willing to work on it, so much the better. But to have a good marriage, you not only have to be good communicators and stay involved, you also have to be willing to do 60% of the work. And the reason I say 60% of the work is because both parties always feel like they knew more for their spouse than their spouse does for them. And so if you're willing to do 60%, a little bit more than half, then when you don't feel like the other person is pulling their full weight, that's okay, because you signed up for 60%. And I have to tell you, sometimes the greatest joy in a relationship is doing more for the other person than they do for you. Sometimes giving of yourself is the best gift you can give yourself, because at the end of the day, that's the kind thing to do, and kindness is never repaid, it's only passed on. I hope this hasn't sounded too preachy, but after seeing the debacles that are the Daybell trial and the Stock trial, and also the Murdaugh trial, I guess, at the same time, I have to say that somebody needs to be out there teaching a course for young people about what to look for in marriage. So that's why I did this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments down below. If you disagree about anything, I'd love to hear your take on this. I would love to hear if you have something to offer in terms of lessons you've learned in your marriage. Please put them in the comments down below. You might help somebody else through a really tough spot. And that, again, is an act of kindness. Thank you so much for watching. Have a terrific day.
If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.